Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if neglected Naruto is ulquiorra in Bleach. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by holyfoxboy and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto or ulquiorra or any other reference to Bleach or Naruto. Break. Naruto watched him passively as his parents, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, taught his sister, Amaya, Night Rain, and other jutsu. He was used to this since they had been doing it for the last 7 years. He knew that his parents did not hate him or anything, just that Amaya was the savior as the civilians called her and gave her more attention. You see, the Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked the village 7 years ago. The Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, used a forbidden jutsu, also known as a kinjutsu, to summon the Shinigami and seal the Kyuubi into Amaya at the cost of his own life. They did this as they found a scroll that said that the Kyuubi was female and decided that a female container would be a better choice than a male. They had told them about the sealing as soon as they could understand it. Right after his father told the village what had happened to the fox, everyone saw Amaya as the savior. A few though did not but change their minds after meeting her. This though created a problem for him. As time went on he slowly faded into the background. While his parents would help now and then, they mostly just helped Amaya. When he was younger he was angry and frustrated with them. As time went on though, his hate and anger slowly faded into indifference and coldness. He mostly just spent his time in the library reading about past events and other things. One though interested him greatly. He told a story about warriors that used swords that were made of their own soul and that each had its own power that the user could use, that is after you learned the sword's name. It did not say much about them after that, other than their enemies that they fought were something called hollows. The warriors, or Shinigami as he found out after reading deeper into the book, fought these hollows to protect the souls of the dead, as hollows ate other souls to sate their hunger. One Shinigami though wanted to ascend past his power and attain the seat of the Soul King or the Shinigami King. It was said that he used an item that he had stolen, something called a Hagyoku, to create a rancor, a hollow with Shinigami powers. These were hollows that had removed parts of their masks, as not all of it can be taken off, to gain Shinigami powers. The Shinigami used these rancor to fight the other Shinigami and open a portal to the Shinigami King's domain. Once there he fought the Shinigami King but was crushed by the King's power. After that it only goes on to rumors. It was said that he created what the world now knows as the 9 Biju to destroy all Shinigami and hollows so that no one could try and overthrow him again, as that would destroy the balance of the universe. After they were all destroyed he left the Biju on the planet to keep the balance of the world in order. What interested Naruto though was not the Biju or Shinigami, it was the rancor and hollows. He, unfortunately, could not find anything more about them than that one book. Naruto was knocked out of his thoughts when he heard his mother calling him over. Once he was beside his sister, as she too was called over, he asked, "Yes, Akasama." Kushina frowned slightly at him before it disappeared before Naruto or Amaya could see, or at least Kushina thought so. "I just wanted to tell you that since you have turned 7 a week ago, Minato-kun and I have enlisted you into the academy for the next 6 years. Amaya jumped up and down in excitement while Naruto nodded before asking, "Is that all, Akasama?" His voice emotionless and indifferent as ever since he turned 5. Kushina once again frowned before saying, "Yes, that is all. You may do what you want until dinner in 6 hours. Thank you." Naruto spoke before turning and heading into the forest that surrounded their home. Amaya though smiled before running out of the compound to get together with her friends. Kushina smiled as she watched her daughter run out of their house before turning to look into the forest that Naruto had just entered. She sighed before smiling as she felt a familiar pair of arms wrap around her waist. She leaned back into her husband's chest as she continued to look at the forest. "Something troubling you, honey?" Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage, asked as he heard her sigh. "I am worried about Naruto-kun. I mean, he doesn't have any friends and he spends all his time in the family library." Kushina spoke after a moment. Minato sighed as well before speaking. "I know, hon. Hopefully he will make some friends at the academy. That is one of the reasons that we entered them into the academy. I heard that the clan heads are enrolling their own kids, so he should be able to make at least one friend." What Minato and Kushina did not know was that Naruto had no friends because most just wanted to use him to get close to his sister. This, along with his parents' treatment of them, is what changed Naruto into his emotionless and indifferent self. "Well, the kids are gone for a few hours and we are alone in the house. Is there anything that you want to do?" Minato spoke up, unaware to the changes that were happening to the future that started with Naruto's journey into the forest. Kushina let a perverted grin come over her face as she turned to her husband. "I can think of a few." With that she engaged her husband into a tongue battle before body flickering them to their bedroom. With Naruto had decided to take a walk into the forest that surrounded the Namikaze compound. It was one of the things that relaxed him as he listened to the wildlife that surrounded him. Naruto, though, did not know that he was about to change the future with this decision. Before long, Naruto found himself going deeper into the forest than before as he listened to the wildlife. He only noticed this when almost all noises seemed to get quieter and quieter until they were all gone. That is, until he heard running water. There shouldn't be water out here. At least I don't think there should be, Naruto thought as he followed the noise. Once there, he was met with a beautiful sight. The clearing, at least 100 meters in diameter, with a small raging waterfall falling down a small rocky wall. Around the clearing he saw many wild flowers and many different plants. What caught his attention the most, though, was the feeling he got from the waterfall. It had a cold and indifferent feel to it, along with loneliness. As he walked forward, he saw appeared to be a hole or cave behind the waterfall. He cocked his head to the side as he thought, what's this doing here? A small amount of curiosity in his thoughts. Deciding to follow his curiosity, he slowly and cautiously approached the cave. It looked safe, Naruto thought as he stood at the mouth of the cave, with the waterfall roaring behind him. Naruto, though, knew that counted very little in the ninja world. He continued to slowly and cautiously enter the cave as much as he could. Once further inside, the darkness started to grow until there was no light at all. Naruto continued to enter the cave even with small amount of fear that was slowly starting to grow within him. Before long, though, something happened that truly fascinated him. Green crystals that were embedded into the sides of the cave started to glow, lighting the way into the cave. He studied the crystals as he continued to walk. Before long, he came across the end of the tunnel as he could see a brighter glowing green light in front of him. Once he stepped into the light, he had to shield his eyes as the light blinded him for a moment. When he opened his eyes, he saw that he had entered a giant cave that had a multiple number of green crystals. He also saw a pedestal made of the same crystal with what he guessed was a sword floating on top of it. He walked towards it as he studied it. It looked like a standard katana with a green handle and sheath. The guard had two curved extensions from its long sides, with a line going through both sides to give it an eye-like appearance. He stopped in front on the pedestal as he continued to look at the sword. He reached his hand out to grab the sword but stopped just before grabbing it. Should I really be trying to take the sword? I mean, it is here for a reason. He continued to think about this before making a decision. He moved his hand the last few inches and grabbed it. Before he could do anything, he felt his chakra spike before consciousness left him. Mindscape. Naruto let out a small groan as he came to. He slowly opened his eyes to let his eyes get used to the light when he realized something. There was only moonlight out instead of sunlight. Akasama won't like it if I am late to dinner was his first though before it completely left his mind once he saw where he was. It looked like he was in a never-ending white desert with dead trees spread out along with giant red pillars. He could also make out what looked like a white castle a couple miles away from him. Before he could head towards it to find out where he was, he heard something. He spun around and spotted someone on one of the many red pillars that were spread out. He could make out the human appears of it before it seemed to vanish. Naruto panicked as he looked around for the human that he had seen. He stopped though when a shadow covered his body from behind him. He slowly turned to look at the person. The first thing that he noticed was that it was male and had black hair, though half of it was covered by a bone-white helmet. Parts of his bangs fell just between his green eyes and appeared shoulder length. He also had a green line that looked like tear marks that fell from his eyes. He wore what appeared to be a white jacket and a white hakama with a black sash. His jacket was about a fourth away unzipped and showed the hole that was in his thought, though it looked like it did not bother him. The sword that he had found was also tied to his waist. The man seemed to be studying him, so Naruto did as well when he remembered something from the book he read. All hollows and rancor had holes that went through their bodies. Naruto froze before he whispered, "Hollow." The green-eyed man's emotionless and indifferent expression did not change, but he did raise one of his black eyebrows. "And how, child?" The green-eyed man spoke up in a cold and emotionless tone, the same as his, though it was slightly colder. "Do you know what I am when all of humanity has forgotten us or does not know of our existence?" Naruto slowly let out a breath before returning to his emotionless and indifferent self, as the man did not look like he was going to hurt him yet. "I found a book in my family's library that talked about Shinigami and Hollows along with the rancor." The man nodded before he thought for a moment. "And how did you find my sword?" "I was able to cast a barrier around that clearing and this place before I had to rest in this cave." "I do not know. I was taking a walk through my family's forest to relax and found myself in that clearing. I found the cave and decided to enter." Naruto spoke in the same indifferent tone as the stranger. The hollow nodded before returning to his thoughts. "That barrier I cast would only allow my new wielder in, as I had to seal myself into my Zanpakuto to survive from those 9 beasts that the Shinigami King unleashed to destroy us. I will test the boy to see if he is worthy to wield my power, if not." He left his thoughts hanging and he turned to the boy in front of him. "If you know what I am, child, why do you not run?" If you wanted to hurt me you would have already. Naruto spoke, keeping his voice as even and calm as possible. Naruto saw the man raise his eyebrows before speaking again. Correct, child. Now you must know something before I continue. The barrier that I cast was made to allow only my wielder to enter. I have decided to test you to see if you are worthy of my power. Naruto nodded slowly before asking, what is your name? I will explain who I am and why I am here if you pass my test. If you do not then I will kill you. His voice still indifferent and emotionless to the world. Naruto tensed before relaxing. He had no choice anyway. If his speed was any indication, he could kill him before he blinked. The hollow nodded to him before saying, I will now administer the test. For this you have to just relax and hold still. Naruto nodded before doing so. The hollow nodded before placing his hand on Naruto's head. Several seconds passed, and Naruto was about to ask what he was doing when a sharp spike in pain erupted in his small body. He stood firm and fought through the pain as the strange hollow that he had met by accident continued with his test. To the man it looked as if a series of clips ran through his head. He saw every memory of Naruto's to his emotion to his very soul. To Naruto it felt as if an eternity had passed by before the hollow removed his hand from his head. He doubled over clutching his stomach as soon as he could and waited for the pain to pass. Once it did he stood and waited for the hollow's response. My name is Ulquiorra Cipher. The now named Ulquiorra said after a moment of studying the child. Naruto looked up confused for a moment before he let a small smile appear on his face when he realized the importance of this. He had passed Ulquiorra's test. The smile disappeared a moment later returning Naruto to his emotionless mask. Now my new wielder, Ulquiorra spoke up, there are several things that you need to know before we continue and do not worry about time. This is your mind and time moves very slowly in the outside world compared to here. He held up his hand when he saw that Naruto was about to talk. I will explain that to you later. Naruto reluctantly nodded. Seeing that Naruto had his full attention on him he continued. Now then when I gave you your test I looked through your memories and saw the book that you read. Well I am surprised that it basically summarizes what happened. It is wrong on one thing. I was the only one to survive from the 9 beasts or Biju as you humans call them. I was able to escape from them while they were distracted with destroying the other Espada or Rancor that you have heard about. The Espada were the 10 strongest hollows which Aizen had at his command. Ulquiorra paused here to see if he still had Naruto's attention. Once he saw that he did he continued. Aizen was the one who used the Hejoku to create a Rancor out of regular hollows. I was the 4th Espada. I though, had something that the other Espada did not. A second release. Now I am sure that you remember that the book said that Shinigami had swords that were made of part of the wielder's soul and that each had a name. When he saw Naruto nod he went on. While Shinigami had 2 releases called Shikai and Bankai, Hollows only had 1 release that we called Resurrection. It is the same as a Shinigami using Shikai but instead of releasing the sword's power, we released our own restricted power that had been sealed into his Zanpakuto. This showed what our real bodies looked like and unleashed our instincts as all hollows were creatures of instinct. Are you following me so far? Naruto nodded as reading all books he did in his family library had increased his intelligence, though it was only with book smarts and vocabulary. I though, was able to use a second release. Well I do not know why this is nor do I care, it did allow me to escape. While it did not give me the power to kill the Biju, I could at least injure them. After I did I was able to find this cave and place a barrier to hide my power from them. Afterwards I was very weak and dying, so I sealed myself into my sworder's Zanpakuto. Here he paused once more to think about how to continue with this. Back then we, the Shinigami and Hollows, used something called spiritual power. Your people now use chakra which, as you have read, is made up of physical and spiritual energy mixed together. Now for me to survive, my powers slowly adapted to the world. My spiritual powers slowly mixed with physical energy, turning my power into chakra. While I could no longer leave my sword, as my soul had merged with my sword spirit that all Zanpakuto have, I could train with my new powers. I found that the merging had made me more powerful. If I had to guess I could tie with the Gobi in an all-out battle. Naruto's jaw dropped. After he recovered from his uncharacteristic moment he returned his attention to Ulquiorra. While this did surprise me I continued to retrain my abilities. I found that I could still use all of my old techniques except for one. Sunito, which was a high-speed technique that all higher-level hollows could use. It seemed that it could not be used without spiritual-based power. As Ulquiorra paused Naruto spoke up. Ulquiorra-san. Will there be any changes to me that will happen when I connect with the sword? Ulquiorra nodded. Yes there will be a few differences when you connect your soul with me. I do not know the extent of the change it will be so you will have to wait to find out. Naruto nodded his head as he thought about all that he had been told. Now, Ulquiorra spoke up, knocking Naruto out of his thoughts, is there anything that you would like for me to explain? Naruto nodded before asking, will I be able to release your sword's power? Yes, you will be able to after you learn my true name. Once you do, you can release my power. Since it is my power, you can expect to change into my resurrection form, and then you will gain my second release once I see that you can handle it. So I will change into you once I release the sword's power? Naruto asked with confusion clear in his voice. Ulquiorra shook his head in the negative before explaining. No, you will look like my released form. You will keep your characteristics but will look like I did in my released form. Such as that you will have yellow hair while I have black, though it might change to black after the connection is made. Naruto nodded at that before thinking if he missed anything. Why is time move slower than in here than the real world? Time seems to move faster and while it is in fact moving faster. The mind or brain works faster than anything in the world. So we are able to do more in here because time moves faster. Don't know if this is right but go along with it. Naruto nodded. Now then, my new wielder, it is time to connect your soul with my own. Place your hands on our blade. But that he unsheathed his sword and held it horizontally in front of his with both hands. Naruto did so and the sword began to glow a deep green. As the glow grew, Naruto spoke to his new partner. Oh, and my name is not wielder, it is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. But that the light grew to blinding levels, making each of them shield their eyes. Once it died down, Ulquiorra saw that he was alone and his blade was gone along with the sheath. Naruto awoke with a pained groan. As he slowly sat up, he looked around. He saw that he was still inside the crystal cave. He looked down and saw Ulquiorra's, now his, sword lying next to him. He grabbed it and slowly stood up as his body still hurt from adapting to his new powers. Once he stood up, he began to exit the cave. Once he was out, he headed towards the small pond that the waterfall fell into. He looked down into the pond and examined his appearance. He saw that he was a few inches taller. If he had to guess, he would say that he was now a little taller than his sister. As he had been shorter with the Kyuubi giving her body more nutrients and making her grow slightly faster. He snapped out of his thoughts and continued looking over himself. His one sun-kissed blonde hair now had black streaks running through it. He saw that he had more muscle mass, though it did not make him look like a small bulky boy. It looked like he did a lot of swimming. His cloths also felt like a second skin. The last thing he noticed, how he did not sooner, was beyond him, were the two green tear-like marks that traveled down from his eyes. Looks like I will have to go shopping for new cloths. Looks like you will indeed. The cloths you have on are not suitable for combat or training. Naruto's head snapped around, looking around the clearing for an intruder or threat. When he saw none, it led him to one conclusion. Ulquiorra-san? Naruto asked as he looked for his partner. Yes, Naruto-kun. It looks like I am able to talk to you through your mind and vice versa, but think what you want to say to me instead of talking. People might think that you have gone crazy if you start talking out loud. Also, it is Ulquiorra-sensei, as I will be teaching you how to use all of my powers. Naruto nodded with a small smile on his face. Now he would have a friend and teacher. A real teacher. Now then, Naruto-kun, how are you going to explain your changes in me, sword, to your parents? I take it that they will not react well to your changes. It is not every day that your appearance changes so drastically in a few hours. In our world we have what are called sentinel swords or weapons. They choose who wield them, and some can change their owner's appearance to better use and understand how they work and are used. I will just tell them that you are one, which technically you are. Ulquiorra nodded before he remembered something. Oh, Naruto-kun, I just remembered. You have also gained a few other things from me. Your speed and reflexes have increased. Your skin has also hardened, we call this hierro, steel skin. As you grow older and train, it will grow harder and stronger, making it all the harder for your opponent to cut you. Also, your intelligence has increased and you also have gained my high-speed regeneration. I will teach you how to use this in the future. Naruto nodded, slightly overwhelmed by all the things he had gained just for passing Ulquiorra's test. Once he thought over everything, he looked towards the sun and saw that about 5 hours had passed. He stood up quickly and began running home, but not before tying this blade to his hip with a sash that was wrapped around it, as he did not want his mother angry with him. Naruto, though, did not know how much his speed had increased and wound up running right into a tree. Once he was able to pull himself out of the tree, muttering curses all the way, he slowly started running towards his house, getting used to his new speed as he increased his speed once he got used to his current speed. Once he entered his family compound, he headed towards the front door. He opened it and headed inside, but not before taking off his shoes. He heard and smelled his mother cooking dinner in the kitchen and heard his father and sister talking in the dining room. Better get this over with, he thought before making sure that his cold and indifferent face was in place before he entered the dining room. When he entered, he saw that his father was talking to Amaya about the Rasengan. He cleared his throat to get their attention. He saw his father turn towards him. He froze and reached for a kunai before he stopped when he looked closer and saw Naruto's sapphire blue eyes that he had inherited from him, as his sister had gotten her mother's amethyst eyes along with her red hair. Amaya just looked at him suspiciously before suddenly shouting out in surprise, "Naruto and Naichin." Naruto nodded at her, and Naruto saw his father relax slightly but not completely. Naruto also heard his mother coming from the kitchen. When she entered she was about to ask what happened but stopped when her eyes landed on her son. She reached for a kunai but stopped when Naruto spoke. "Otu-sama, Akasama, Amaya Amatachin, could you please sit down? I have something that I wish to tell you." They nodded and Kushina sat down at the table that was big enough to sit their family. Naruto sat down after her on the last seat, which was across from his sister. Naruto cleared his throat before explaining in his emotionless and indifferent voice that his family had to get used to for the last 2 years. "On my walk through the forest I found a clearing with a waterfall. Behind the waterfall I found a cave with green crystals in it that lit the way inside the cave. I entered the cave and found myself in a big cavern filled with crystals. In the cavern I found the sword." Here he unwrapped the sword and laid it on the table. His father and mother studied it before looking at him, wanted to know everything before they asked any questions. "When I touched the sword I was drawn into my mindscape. This is a physical representation of what your mind looks like. Anyway, I meet the spirit that resides in the sword. He gave me a test that I had to pass. If I failed he would have killed me." Here he paused after he heard his sister and mother gasp, and his father narrowed his eyes. "I was however able to pass his test and gain the sword and any powers that he will teach me. My change in appearance is all from me connecting to the sword. It changed me to enable me to handle the power it gives me." Once finished he waited for his parents to speak. Finally after a few minutes Kushina spoke up. "Minato-kun, can what Naruto-kun is saying actually happen?" Minato thought for a moment before he said, "I think it can. There is a man named Kisame Hoshigaki, the monster of the hidden mist. He is a Nukenin that possesses a sword named Samehada. It's a sword made of scales that eats chakra. It also changed him into a shark-like man. He has blue skin, gills, and sharp shark-like teeth. It is also true for the rest of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, but to a lesser extent." Kushina nodded before they all stopped and looked towards the sword. Minato reached out to pick it up as he wanted to examine it closer. "Naruto-kun, I would advise you to tell your father not to touch me, better yet do not let anyone touch me. As you are my owner and you will be the only one to wield me." Naruto nodded before saying, "Otu-sama, don't too." He was too late as Minato had picked up the sword by the handle. Before Minato could do anything multiple black and green spikes jutted out from the handle, piercing his hand. He cried out as he quickly released it. Naruto caught it before it could hit the ground and tied it to his waist. He turned to his father, who was having his hand healed by Kushina with a worried look on her face, before saying, "Sorry Otu-sama, but Ulquiorra-sensei goes not want anyone but me to wield or hold him." Minato just chuckled lightly before saying, "It is alright Naruto-kun. I should have known that a sentential sword had some type of defense for anyone who is not its wielder." Kushina nodded as she finished healing her husband's hand. She turned to Naruto and asked, "Naruto-kun, why did you call your sword Ulquiorra-sensei?" "My sword spirit is named Ulquiorra and he will be teaching me about the different powers that I gain." Kushina nodded at the explanation before turning to look at her daughter, who was looking at the sword with curiosity. "Amaya-chan, will you come with me to the kitchen? I will need your help bringing out the food." Amaya nodded and followed her mother as Minato turned to his son. "Naruto-kun, I will place a storage seal on your left palm. This will let you store your sword in it as I do not want you carrying it in the house." Naruto nodded, his eyes showing no emotion, which Minato still was not used to, before silence descended upon them as they waited for the food. A few minutes of silence passed before Kushina and Amaya brought in their dinner. Once everything had been eaten they placed their dishes in the sink for Kushina to wash, while Amaya went to her room to read more about chakra. Minato led Naruto back to the dinner table, and Naruto was able to see that there was an ink bottle on the table, along with an old cloth under it to keep the table clean. Once they were seated across from each other Minato spoke up. "Alright Naruto-kun. For this seal I need you to cut your finger and pour a little bit of your blood into this ink bottle." Naruto did so and Minato explained after he was finished. "I had you do this so that I could make a blood storage seal for your sword. Now most blood seals can be unsealed by someone with certain blood or if you are a relative of the blood that is keyed into the seal. The seal I am going to make is a special case. This seal will only accept your blood and will only open with your blood. Do you follow?" Naruto nodded. Minato smiled slightly before continuing. "Good. Now while I am not an expert on this I can make this seal into a design that you want. Is there anything particular that you want this to look like?" Naruto thought for a moment before answering. "A slighted green eye with a black circle behind it." Minato raised one of his eyebrows before he nodded and asked Naruto to place his left hand on the table with his palm up. He did so and waited for his father to finish with the seal. Once finished, Minato said, "Now all you have to do is place some of your blood on the seal and add chakra to it as you hold the sword near it. The seal will suck it in and keep it in suspended animation." Naruto did and watched as his new sword disappeared in a puff of smoke. "Thank you, Otu-sama," Naruto said as he bowed before heading towards his room to get some sleep for the academy tomorrow. He was tired from the day's events, though he let no one know it. Minato gave a tight smile as he watched his son head to bed. He knew Naruto did not like him or Kushina as much a normal child did, but he knew that he did not hate them. He also knew that he and Kushina did not spend as much time with him as they did with Amaya, and he was starting to regret that. Thankfully, Naruto still loved his sister as a normal brother would and did not blame her for all the attention that she was given. Minato let out a sigh as he headed towards the kitchen after he put up his things as he did not want his wife yelling at him again for not picking up his things and began helping her with the dishes before they both headed to bed as well. As Naruto walked down the hall towards his room, he thought about all the things he went through. He knew that things were going to get interesting. Before he continued to his room, he decided to stop and check up on his sister, who slept in the room next to his. When he entered, he saw his sister was sleeping peacefully. He gave a small smile before he slowly backed out of the doorway. "Naruto Naichin." Naruto stopped and looked inside again. Amaya was sitting up and looking at him as she rubbed her left eye. "Yes, do you need something, Amato-chan?" Amaya nodded and said in a low whisper, "I had a nightmare. Can you stay with me?" Naruto nodded and walked over to her bed. He sat down next to Amaya and she leaned into him, enjoying his warmth. Naruto gave a small smile to his sister, though she did not see it, as he stroked her shoulder-length hair. Once she had fallen asleep, he slowly moved away from her and gently lowered her to her pillow before pulling her covers over her. He kissed her forehead and then began walking to his room. He froze though when he heard what his sister said in her sleep. "I love you, Naruto Naichin." A small true smile lit up Naruto's face before he returned to his normal cold self. Naruto said one thing before he exited his sister's room and it made her small smile grow larger, as though she had heard him. "I love you too, Amato-chan." But that said, he headed towards his room and removed his cloths before getting into bed. He fell asleep looking at his new tattoo. Morning of next day. When Naruto awoke, he headed towards his shower. Once he finished his hot shower, he got dressed in a black t-shirt, white pants, and black ninja sandals. "I really need to get new cloths. I will do that after school." But that thought, he headed downstairs. When he arrived, he saw his mother dressed in her usually attire, which was the regular Jonin attire, just either finished cooking breakfast. He sat down and filled his plate and began to eat. As he was eating, Amaya walked downstairs and joined him, and they were soon joined by Kushina. After they finished breakfast and Kushina washed the dishes, they headed towards the academy with Kushina and the lead. As they walked, Naruto was talking with his new sensei. "After you finish getting you cloths, Naruto, I want you to find a place that you can train in peace. Since some of my techniques, or jutsu as you call them, are rather destructive." "Hi, sensei. Anything else that you want me to get at the store for training?" "Wait until we get there. It will give some time to think of all the things you will need." Naruto nodded as he returned to reality. He saw that they were just entering the academy. Once they entered, Naruto saw all the clan heads talking to each other with their children talking a few yards away. "Kushina-chan." Naruto heard before turned to identify the person. He saw that it was Hana Hyuga, wife of Hiashi Hyuga and mother of Hinata and Hanabi Hyuga, and his mother's best friend. She is basically an older version of Hinata. "Hana-chan. How are you?" Kushina asked as she walked over to the clan heads. Naruto was able to see the Aburame, Akimichi, Yamanaka, Nara, Uchiha, and Inyazuka clan heads along with their wives, except for Tsume Inyazuka, as she was the clan head. Naruto did not know what had happened to her husband. "Good. How have things been?" As Kushina and the clan head started to talk, Naruto and Amaya walked over to the other children, while Amaya walked over to her friends, which were the Hyuga twins, Hinata and Hanabi, Ino Yamanaka, Kira Uchiha, Sasuke's younger twin sister, and a girl named Sakura Haruno, while Naruto walked over to a tree that was away from the over children, but it was close enough that he was able to keep an eye on his sister. As Naruto looked around, he saw Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akimichi watching the clouds and eating from the chips that Choji carried around. He was able to make out Shino Aburame sitting near a tree talking to his destruction bugs, though Naruto did not know why he looked at him in what he believed was confusion. Naruto could not read him well his coat before looking back at his bugs. He spotted Sasuke Uchiha leaning on a tree a few feet away from him with, he suppressed a shiver, a small amount of fangirls around him. He did not see the heir of the Inyazuka clan, Kiba, though. He heard a cry and turned to see what it was. Once he found out what it was, though, his blood boiled and a snarl ripped through the air. He launched himself through the air while unsealing his sword. With Kiba. Kiba was having a good day. He woke up to a delicious breakfast that his mother, Tsume, had made before she told him that he was going to get his companion tomorrow if he was good on his first day of school. He grinned at the news before he went upstairs to get ready for the day. Once he came down, his mother led him to the academy. Once he arrived, he went over to talk to Shikamaru and Choji, who he had met on a few occasions that his mother was invited to dinner at their compound. After talking to them for a few minutes, he heard Hinata's mother welcome someone. He turned and saw Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, the most wanted woman in Konoha, enter the academy. He focused his attention though on her daughter. While her daughter was not hot now, he just knew that she would be in the future, so he decided to get her as his girlfriend now and save himself the trouble in the future. Had Kiba known that he was about to make an enemy of her brother, a person who would go on to surpass his father and one who inspired fear in any man who wanted to court Amaya, he would have not gone through with his plan. Once Kiba walked up to Amaya, who was surrounded by her friends, he asked, "Hello beautiful, would you like the honor of joining me for dinner tonight?" Amaya turned to him and looked him over before smiling politely and saying, "No thank you. I am not interested in dating now. Maybe some other time." She then turned back to her friends and continued their conversation. Kiba stood stunned. No one had ever said no to him. No one. With a snarl on his face, he grabbed her hair, making her cry out and sealing his fate, before saying, "Now listen her bitch. You will be mine whether you like it or not. Do you understand?" Before she could answer, everyone heard an angry snarl rip through the air. Before Kiba could locate the noise, he felt a foot slam into his temple, making him lose his hold on Amaya's hair and sending him flying. Once Naruto's foot connected with Kiba's temple, he spun his body and nailed his heel into his stomach, sending him to the ground. He raised his blade and brought it down to try and slash at his family jewels. Keyword. Tried. Once the blade was an inch from Kiba's body, he felt multiple hands grab him, preventing him from dealing the dog boy the punishment he deserved. He looked and saw that the clan had him in their grip. Naruto channeled chakra into his muscles and slowly moved himself towards Kiba, who had a look of fear on his face. The clan heads raised their eyebrows when the boy they had in their grip slowly moved towards Kiba. Granted, they were not using their full strength, but it was impressive for a 7-year-old. Before they had to use force to get him to stop, they heard Kushina call out, "Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. What in the name of Kami-sama do you think you are doing?" They felt the kid freeze before his sword vanished in a puff of smoke, and he relaxed. They let go of him and helped Kiba to his feet, though they quickly moved him away from Naruto when they saw that he was still looking at Kiba with rage in his eyes, though his face remained blank. Naruto looked towards his mother, who was marching towards him, looking very much like the Red Death of Konoha that she was. Once she was in front of him, he looked at her with his face black and his eye emotionless. "Akasama, I was merely dealing the punishment that Kiba deserved by Konoha law." Kushina raised an eyebrow as she motioned for him to explain. Konoha law states that anyone who assaults any descendant of the current or former Hokage without a true cause is to be punished by a family member of the Hokages. Since Kiba was thinking with his other head, I believed that removing it would prevent this from happening again. All the males wondered how he was able to say that with a straight face. The females though turned to Kiba, who was being yelled at by Tsume, as she had seen what he did, as she had an eye on him at all times, since he usually did not think before he did things. "And how do you know that?" Kushina asked. "I saw him reaching for Amado-chan's pants. Since they were facing away from your group, you did not see." Once again his eyes flashed with anger. "This is the most emotion that I have seen from him in 2 years," Kushina thought as she watched her son's hand twitch towards his seal. She sighed before turning towards Tsume. Tsume saw her do so out of the corner of her eye and said, "Do not worry. He will be severely punished when he gets home after school. For the next 6 years." Kiba let out a loud gulp at the tone his mother used and the time he would be punished. Kushina nodded as she turned to her son and said, "Is that okay with you, Naruto-kun?" Naruto nodded before saying, "As long as he stays away from Amado-chan, I do not care." But that he walked over to Amaya, who was being cared for by her friends. Once he was by her side, he asked, "Are you alright, Amado-chan?" She nodded as she stood up, as she had fallen when Kiba had let go of her hair. Once she was up, she turned to Naruto and hugged him. His eyes widened before he returned her hug. Once they separated, he pushed her over to her friends who were watching them with small smiles on their faces. She stopped and looked back towards him, but he just gave a small smile to her and waved her on before his face went black like usually. After a few minutes had passed, they heard the bell ring and the children headed towards their classroom. The adults headed home and in Tsume's case began planning Kiba's punishment. As Naruto sat down in his classroom with the rest of the clan heads and Sakura, he saw that most gave him a wide berth, except for his sister and her friends, and surprisingly Shino. He looked towards the front when he heard the door open and saw a Chunin with a scar running across his nose enter. "Welcome everyone. I am your instructor, Haruki Yamino. I will have the pleasure to teach you all for the next 6 years." Now let's begin with the history of Konoha. Loud groans met his announcement. This is going to be a long 6-year, Naruto thought as Karuka began his lecture. Naruto was happy when class was over, though he didn't show it. Now he could go get some new clothes. After telling Amaya where he was going, as she was going home to continue her training with their mother and father, once he got off duty, he headed to the shopping district. As he walked towards the shop he had in mind, he thought about what he wanted to wear, while also ignoring the whispers of the villagers. He would like to wear the same thing as Ulquiorra, but all that white would make him easy to spot. As he thought this over, he had his sensei speak up. Naruto, you could just switch the black and white around. If you do, then black will be the main color and will allow you to hide better. Naruto thought about before he decided to try it and see how he looked before making his final decision. He looked up to see that he had arrived in front of his favorite store. The Wolf Pack. He entered and walked to the shinobi clothing section of the store. He quickly found a black jacket and a black hakama, along with a white sleeveless shirt and a white sash. After he had found them, he grabbed a pair of white sandals before entering one of the changing booths. After changing his cloths, he looked into the mirror that hung in every booth. He saw that he did look just like his new sensei, just with a few changes like his hair for one. After looking over himself for a minute, he decided that he liked it. He picked up his old cloths and exited the booth. He threw his cloths in a nearby trash can before approaching the counter. He saw the owner now sitting behind the counter reading a book. Once Naruto stood in front of the counter, he reached up and knocked on the wood. The man, who appeared to be in his 40s, looked up before his face turned confused at not seeing anybody before he looked down. His face broke out into a grin once he saw who it was. Naruto-san, it has been a while since you have been here. How are you? Good to see you as well, Toshiro-san. I have been good. The now named Toshiro nodded before saying, so the rumors are true, you have changed. Well, at least physically. You're still like a younger Itachi. Naruto only nodded while keeping his face blank before asking, can you get me several of these outfits and 4 of those? He pointed to a display that said chakra weights that Ulquiorra had pointed out for him to get. Toshiro nodded before getting everything together. Once it was, he returned to the counter and held up one of the chakra weights. Naruto saw that it was a blue band with several seals woven into the fabric. These are a new thing that I was able to get my hands on. The seals on these bands hold chakra and weigh the body down with it. Another cool thing about these is that when you cancel or shut them off, the chakra stored into them return back to you. Naruto nodded before asking, do you have to send the chakra to it, or does it suck the chakra into it automatically? Toshiro grinned. These will automatically suck the chakra into them once your body gets used to the weight. You can stop the process if you want to, though. This is so that you can get used to running at high speed before increasing the weight. Naruto nodded before paying for everything and leaving. As he headed towards his home, he thought about how he had met Toshiro. It had been a few years ago, and he had been looking for a store to buy some clothes, as his mother and father had taken Amaya to get some cloths and just gave him some money that would not give him a discount or whisper about him, since he was the Yondame's son and the brother of the savior. He had happened about Toshiro's store and entered. From the moment he saw him, he treated him like a regular customer, and Naruto enjoyed it. He snapped out of his thoughts to see that he had arrived at his house or compound, since it was big enough to be considered a compound. He bit his thumb and wiped the blood on the wooden gate that surrounded the compound. Once the gate was opened, he went to his room and hung up his cloths before headed out into the surrounding forest. When he was back in the clearing that the cave was located in, he waited for his sensei's instruction. Alright Naruto-san, I want you to put on your new weights and add enough of your chakra that it is hard to move. Naruto nodded before taking the weights out of the pocket in his jacket, which he had left unzipped. After putting the 4 weights on, 2 for his ankles and the other 2 for his wrists, he slowly channeled his chakra, which his father had him and his sister access early on, into the bands. Once it was hard to stand, he stopped. He looked at the band and saw the kanji for 5 on it. Must mean 5% of my total chakra, Naruto thought as he waited for further instructions. Now for the next few years we will be getting your body up to standards. Since my release will put stress on your body, you must get it ready before you can use it. So to start, I want you to do 5 laps around this clearing. Along with 50 push-ups and sit-ups. You will do this every day until your weights get to 30%. Once they do, you are to stop the bands from sucking up your chakra and get your body completely used to the weight, as in you should not even feel it. Also, every few months you are to increase the number of exercises. Naruto's face remained black as he started his workout, but mentally he was glaring at Ulquiorra, who just raised an eyebrow. After several hours of panting, Naruto finished his workout. As he was getting his breath back, he listened to Ulquiorra's new instructions. Now that you are finished, I will teach you a skill that the Espada were able to use. We called it Pesquisa. The Espada used it as a sonar. This skill will let you determine the chakra level and location of anything that holds chakra. However, since everything in this world has chakra, you will have to practice with this skill so that your brain does not have information overload. Naruto nodded, listened carefully to Ulquiorra's instructions on using the technique. Once he understood it, he began practicing it. Unfortunately, he did not know at what level he should start at and wound up overloading his brain with all the locations of chakra signatures. Once the pain settled down, he started again but only focused on the things in the clearing. By the time he had to go back home, he could detect anything within 15 feet of himself. Though he had to stand still to do it, Ulquiorra seemed happy with his progress, though it was hard to tell. The next day Naruto headed to the clearing and did his workout. Once he was finished, he started to work on his Pesquisa skill, but before he could, he heard his sensei speak up. "Naruto-san, I am going to pull you into your mind. I have something that I want to teach you today that you will work on along with your Pesquisa ability. However, it would be better to show you how it is done instead of explaining it. So are you ready?" Naruto nodded before he felt a tugging sensation in the back of his mind. He closed his eyes and allowed himself to be pulled to his mindscape. When the feeling stopped, he opened his eyes and was met with the familiar surroundings of his mindscape along with his sensei. "Today I will be teaching you a technique that the Aranker called a Bala, hollow bullet. A Bala is a weaker but faster version of a Zero, hollow flash. Instead of describing these, I will instead demonstrate them." But that he turned towards one of the many red pillars that were in the desert. Naruto watched as he raised his right hand and pointed his middle and index finger at the pillar. Green chakra gathered in front of the two fingers and created a green orb that hovered just barely away from his fingers. Naruto watched in awe as Ulquiorra fired the orb, creating an energy blast. The green Zero connected with the pillar and proceeded to destroy it, leaving nothing behind but dust and whirling sand. This is a standard attach that all hollows use. The only reason that you are able to use my techniques is that when you merged your soul with me, it made your chakra just as dense or heavy, however you want to put it. A Biju can use this as well, but it is slightly different. The Biju fire something that they call a menacing ball. It is just like a Zero, only slightly different since they must fire it from their mouths. While you, with enough practice, will be able to fire it from several places. However, you will find that it will be more powerful if you fire it from your right hand. Naruto nodded as he thought over the information he was given. Once he asked, "Ulquiorra-sensei, are there other versions of the Zero? You said that the Bala was another version, so that should mean that there are more." Ulquiorra nodded. "There are other versions. They are the Zero Oscuras, Dark Hollow Flash, and the Grand Race Zero, Royal Hollow Flash. However, you can only use the Zero Oscuras in our Resurrection form, and I will only teach you the Grand Race Zero after you have at least mastered our Resurrection form." Naruto nodded to show that he understood. Ulquiorra nodded before he pointed his fist at another pillar. Instead of the chakra gathering in front of his fist like Naruto thought it would, have covered his fist in green chakra. The chakra spun around his fist before shooting towards the red pillar. To Naruto it looked like a green blur. Naruto watched as it made contact with the pillar and saw that it only made a small explosion. Ulquiorra lowered his arm and looked at his pupil, who was looking at the tower with a calculating look. "That was a Bala. As you can see, it is weaker but it is at least 20 times faster than a regular Zero. You can also fire these at a rapid pace. Now I will send you back to the real world and you will practice this, and do not worry. Since you have bonded with me, you will have an instinctual knowledge of how to use it. However, I will only allow you to access the information on the Bala. I will give you the information on the Zero after I see that you have mastered the Bala and Pesquisa to my standards." Naruto nodded and waited for his sensei to send him back with hidden excitement. He could not wait to try this Bala. Though he did not show it though, he suspected that his sensei already knew. It was only confirmed when he looked at him with an amused glint in his eyes as he sent him back. Reality. When Naruto returned to the clearing, he began practicing the Bala. Focusing his chakra in the way his instincts commandeered, he followed it. Once he believed it was right, he pointed his fist at a nearby tree. "Bala." Cold and emotionless, his voice carried out through the clearing as he fired the high-speed and destructive technique. Naruto watched as the green Bala raced to the tree, though he was disappointed that it was not even as fast as a genin. Still, with practice he could get that speed up. The Bala did not destroy the tree like he wished, but instead destroyed part of the trunk. Nodding to himself, he began practicing the Bala until he had to go home. The next day, on Naruto's way to his clearing training ground, he was interrupted on his walk by an Anbu. Naruto looked up at the crow mask Anbu. "Can I help you, Crow-san?" His voice blank along with his face. The Anbu nodded. "Yes. Your Otu-san requests that you head home. He wants you and your sister there." Naruto nodded and began walking home as the Anbu disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Once Naruto arrived home, he headed towards the training grounds. There he saw his mother and father standing in front of his sister. Naruto walked towards them until he stood by his sister. She gave him a small smile, and Naruto returned it but returned to his cold and indifferent mask once his father spoke up. I have called you both here to help you find out your elemental affinity and to help you master it. Since it is easier to start on your affinity when you are young. After speaking he pulled out 2 pieces of paper. Amaya looked at in confusion but Naruto already knew what it was thanks to the books in their family library. This, Minato said, is chakra paper. It is made from trees that are grown with chakra and only chakra. All you have to do is channel chakra into them and it will show you what affinity you have for which element. Fire, it will burn, water, it will become damp, earth, it will turn to dust, wind, it will be cut in half, and lightning, it will crumble. The 2 children nodded before taking the paper from their father. Amaya decided to go first and channeled her chakra into the small paper. At first nothing happened but soon it cut right down the middle while one burned. Minato looked at it slightly surprised but not entirely. Well Amaya, it looks like you have a main affinity to wind and a smaller one to fire, which we can conclude came from the Kyuubi. The 2 nodded at that. Naruto held up his paper and channeled his chakra into it. What happened next greatly surprised and confused both Kushina and Minato. The paper glowed an eerie black as black smoke seeped from the paper before it dissolved. Naruto looked to his parents for an explanation. To his surprise he heard his mother whisper something. Mighten. Everyone looked at her, silently asking her to continue. She gave a sigh before explaining. Mighten is a bloodline, yet it is not. It allows the user to use darkness of any kind such as shadows, or they can create their own darkness like the light and the mist smoke that appeared on the chakra paper. She paused before continuing. It is an ability that appears once every 100 years in a random person in the elemental nations. It is rumored to be a gift from Nyx, the goddess of darkness. It is said that she chooses one mortal to bestow part of her power over darkness to. One of my ancestors was chosen, and she even made a few scrolls on some of her jutsu and skills on the ability. Everyone nodded before looking at Naruto to see what he thought on the matter. They saw that there was no change on his blank face. After a few minutes he turned to Kushina. Akasama, may I look at these scrolls? The Red Death of Konoha nodded before making a water clone and ordering it to get the Mighten scrolls from the family library. The clone nodded before doing as told. While the clone retrieved the scroll Minato turned to Naruto. Naruto-kun, you are going to have to work on this on your own as I know nothing of Mighten though, Kushina-chan might. He turned to look at her. She nodded before saying, I do not know a lot but I can at least get you started from what I read from the old Uzumaki vault before it was destroyed, unfortunately that is all I will be able to do. Naruto nodded before looking towards his sister as Minato got her started on wind manipulation. She was to start on cutting a leaf right down the middle with one cut. Naruto watched as his sister struggled before he felt his mother's water clone return by using his Pesquisa ability. He turned to see his mother walking towards him as her clone returned to its liquid state. These are the only scrolls that we had in the library. She handed him 5 scrolls. Naruto looked at them before taking out a spare scroll that he kept on his person before sealing the scrolls into it. Once he returned it to its place he turned to his mother. Now Naruto-kun, while I do not know much about this I was able to find one of the manipulation techniques in an old scroll I had found. It said that you are to focus on a darkness and only darkness. Then try and make it real. I would suggest that you try and make that black mist or smoke that was on the paper or the dark light. After that you will have to think of other ways to master it. Naruto nodded before walking off to a nearby tree. He sat Indian style and began focusing on the dark mist that seeped from his chakra paper. He imagined it seeping out of his body and surrounding him. He felt a weird sensation run through his body before he opened his eyes. He saw a small amount of dark mist floating around his body. If he had to guess he would say that it was about the size of his fist if he was able to compact it. He let his concentration drop before he continued. He did this over and over again until he was called in for dinner. By that time he could summon up enough mist that if compacted together it would be the size of his head. The next day after school he decided to head to a training ground that he had heard his father talking about. He called it Training Ground 44 or the Forest of Death, he really saw nothing wrong with it. It just looked like an overgrown forest or jungle. So he hopped the fence and headed to a clearing that was fairly deep in the jungle. Once he found one he began his workout. Once finished he decided to practice his Bala. After several hours of practice Naruto could say that he was happy with his progress. His Bala was now just a little faster than a low-level genin whereas it had been slower than a fresh genin. He froze though when he heard rushing in the bushes behind him. He slowly turned. What the? Naruto kept a blank face. The creature approached him, though he still could not keep down the awe and slight fear that arose within him as he laid eyes on the creature. It stood on 4 legs and had sleek black fur that shined in the small amount of sunlight that was able to penetrate the trees. Large fangs and deep amethyst eyes glinted as it walked towards him. Soon he was able to see what it was. A black panther. Naruto watched a large cat, which Naruto guessed was about 5 feet at the shoulder, as it slowly walked towards him. It seemed to be studying him, though for what reason he did not know. After several moments the cat seemed to come to a decision because it sat down on its hunches and looked at him. "Hello." Only the slight widening of his eyes showed Naruto's surprise before his face returned to its normal black expression at hearing the clearly feminine voice come from the huge cat. "My name is Anya, Dark Knight. I am a messenger scout of the Black Panther summons. I have been given the task of finding my clan a new summoner. I have seen many people and have tested them, however they have all failed my test and didn't become our summoner. I now wish to test you, Naruto Namikaze." Naruto's mind traveled a million miles an hour thinking about what he had just heard. He was going to be tested to see if he could become a holder of a summoning contract and to the Black Panther tribe no less. He either had Lady Luck's favor or Nyx took a great liking to him, though if it was true he had no idea why. "First, how do you know who I am, and second, why me?" The cat seemed to smile or grin. Naruto could not tell. "I have chosen you, Naruto Namikaze, for 2 reasons. One is because Nyx-sama has taken a liking to you, and as she created our clan, we look into anyone that she takes a liking to, and 2, you also wield a great and ancient power." As she said the last part she looked at the sword strapped to his waist. Naruto tensed as she looked at it before relaxing as she looked at him with amusement in her eyes. "Worry not, child. We will not take it from you. If the Shinigami King didn't destroy the sword himself when the 9 Biju didn't find it, then he left it here for a reason. Now on to business, are you ready for my test?" Naruto slowly nodded with uneasiness of what the test may be. The female cat grinned, Naruto was sure this time, before it vanished in a swirl of darkness. Naruto's eyes widened at seeing the skill before his new instincts, gained by his bonding with Ulquiorra, screamed at him to duck. He did so and narrowly avoided becoming headless. He jumped away from the cat before deactivating his new weights. But the weights gone, he used his full speed, which happened to be low genin, to continue dodging the giant cat that seemed determined to make him headless. After several minutes of this, Naruto spotted a small opening and he took it. Spinning around as fast as he could, he fired his Bala right at the cat's shoulder. The panther cried out in surprise, as the attack was not very strong and did not hurt her, before her own instinct told her to move. She did so and avoided a slash from Naruto's sword, well almost, the sword was able to give her a slight cut on her muzzle. Anya watched as Naruto settled into a defense stance as he watched her. She licked her muzzle, and upon tasting blood she smiled at Naruto before saying, "Congratulations Naruto, you pass." Naruto's control slipped slightly as his eyes widened as he said, "What?" Anya watched in amusement as Naruto's face became black again as he no doubt began to belittle himself in his mind. "I said," Anya spoke up drawing Naruto's attention back to her, "you pass. You are the first human to draw blood from me in over 300 years, though that particularly is my own fault for underestimation you." Naruto nodded slightly though not convinced that he was able to draw blood from so easily from her when no one else was able to in the last 300 years. He eventually gave up on trying to solve it before sheathing his blade, before turning his full attention to Anya. She nodded before a pure black scroll about as big as the toad summoning contract he had seen in his father's study room appeared in front of the panther, before it unrolled in front of her showing Naruto that there was only 2 other names on the scroll. He looked at Anya who nodded to him before he bit his thumb and wrote his name in blood as he had heard from his father, telling Amaya one day, as he wanted her to sign the toad contract one day. Once finished his name glowed black before returning to normal. "Good. I shall take this to our leader and tell her that we have a new summons. Take care Naruto-sama and remember to summon our leader as soon as you are able to." But that Anya took the scroll and vanished in a swirl of darkness. "Well, this is good." Ulquiorra spoke up after the panther had left. "Yes, it is sensei. I have some new partners and maybe new senseis if what Anaya said about Nyx making their clan is true and what she did is anything to go by." He replied back blankly. "Yes, however you are right about one thing, it was too easy to cut her. This means that either she was ordered to let you pass the test or Nyx is behind this." Naruto nodded before taking off back to the village after seeing that the sun was setting while still listening to Ulquiorra. "So for the next 5 years I will have to increase your training. My guess is that if you can get used to the weights fast enough, and you will with my high-speed regeneration, I should be able to teach you our resurrection in about 4 to 4.5 years. While you do this I will continue to train you in the use in my powers, and then you have your work on your might and abilities." Naruto nodded as he came to a stop in front of the Namikaze compound. Once inside he saw that no one was inside before hearing noise from the training grounds in the backyard. Once he arrived he saw that his Otu-sama and Aka-sama were training his sister again. He was not surprised. He knew that his parents would go back to ignoring him for his sister when she started her elemental training. After thinking for a moment he decided to get something to eat before heading to bed so that he could get some rest for his training. As he fell asleep, one last thought drifted into his mind: the next 5 years will be interesting. Time skip 5 years. Boom. Several green orbs rocketed around the thick forest, destroying bark and killing any small animal that had the unfortunate luck to end up in their path. More orbs continued to bombard the forest before a cold and blank voice called out in a whisper, "Zero." The highly concentrated green beam shot from the two outstretched fingers of a young boy before the attack created a large explosion. As the smoke cleared, it showed one Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, surveying his work with silent pride. Naruto had changed much in the 5 years that had passed. His yellow and black hair now looked identical his father's, even the two bangs that framed his face. His eyes had grown darker, now looking like a dark blue sapphire that shined with a small amount of dark light. He had also hit a surprising growth spurt. He now stood a good 5'3", making him the second tallest, with his friend Shino Aburam being the first. His muscle mass had grown greatly with the help of his chakra weights. He now had about 45% of his total chakra into the bands, which he had placed on his wrists and ankles. As of right now, he would place himself at mid-chunin level in speed. In physical strength, he would say low chunin. Along with getting his body into shape, he was also able to get Ulquiora's approval to learn more hollow techniques. He could now do Zero and use his high-speed regeneration to a good degree, at least Ulquiorra said he could. He however told him that when he was able to master it, he'd grow back anything, with the exception being his head. He was also able to get his Bala's speed up. It was now at high chunin level. However, he believed that his real accomplishment was that he finally able to use Resurrection. The downside thought was that he was not able to use it for more than 10 minutes. After that, he would return to his original body and not be able to use it again until the next day or 2 days, depending on how tired he was. He was however able to give low to mid-jonin level a run for their money. Another accomplishment that he achieved was that he was now able to use the 5 jutsu that his Akasama had given him those 5 years ago. They were Mighten. Chains of darkness creates chains made from darkness that come out of a shadow or ground and restrict capture target. Mighten. Dark network creates a web-shaped pattern on the ground around user by using shadows. Caster can use the web to attack, capture, or kill anyone who enters the web's territory. Web gets bigger the more chakra that is fed into the jutsu. May use shadows for other Mighten jutsu. Mighten. Shadow wall creates a solid in front of user from shadow. Mighten. Living nightmare surrounds target in shadows, which then take the form of the person's worst fear and attacks them. Jinjutsu. Mighten. Hellhounds of darkness summons 4 feet tall dogs made from darkness or shadows. User can command them at will. Number of dogs depends on chakra used. These he found were true gifts, though he never thanked him mother, as he believed that the only reason she gave them to him was because he was the only one to use it. At the thought of his parents, his mood soured. Ever since he told them about his new power, which to this day he cursed himself for doing, they had tried to be friendly to him. He however put a stop to this immediately. He was able to see right through them. He knew that they only wanted to study his new powers and find some way to replicate it. To stop this from happening, he kept the blade with him at all times. Pushing thoughts of his parents to the side, he began his way towards his home as the sun was setting, and he needed to get as much rest as possibly, for tomorrow was graduation day at the academy. Thought of the academy soon turned to him thinking about his sister. A small true smile appeared on his face. For a few seconds it left. His sister truly was an angel. Even though his parents continued to train and spoil her, she never grew arrogant. With his parents' training, his Amado was able to get up to high chunin level control of her wind element and mid chunin level with her fire element. He however knew that she could have gotten farther with her shadow clone jutsu training, as his parent had taught it to her when it became apparent to them that she could not make regular clones thanks to the Kyuubi increasing her already large chakra pool. She however decided to round out, so to speak. It took many shadow clones and hard work to increase her chakra control, but she was able to get it up to high chunin level control. After that she worked on her Jinjutsu, Taijutsu and Ninjutsu. Once she had gotten those up to chunin level, she decided to follow in her mother's footsteps and learn Kinjutsu. Once this skill was also at chunin level, she would make multiple shadow clones and have them further improvement of them. However, once his parents saw that she was as strong as a low-level chunin, they decided to start training her in the use of Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto however thought they were fools. She was only 10 and was in no way ready to face the ancient demon. The result was not good. Flashback. Minato and Kushina Namikaze stood in front of their daughter, Amaya Namikaze, with proud looks on their faces. Their daughter had advanced well, and they had brought her to one of the more secluded training grounds to begin training her in Kyuubi's chakra. At the edge of the training ground stood Naruto, watching with a bad feeling rising up in his stomach. "Now Amaya-chan," Minato spoke up, "I need you to meditate like we have been teaching you. However, you need to go deeper than before. You need to find your mindscape. Do you understand?" Amaya nodded before sitting down cross-legged and her palms pushed together. Taking one quick glance at her brother, she began meditating. After what felt like hours to her, she felt a tugging sensation. She quickly followed to a bright white light. Once she came into contact with it, flashed brightly, forcing her to shield her eyes. When the light died down, she saw that she was in a huge forest. "It's beautiful," Amaya said as she looked around the forest. Snapping out of her gazing, she began looking for the cage that housed the Kyuubi. After searching for what felt like days, she was ready to give when she saw something out of the corner of her eye. Quickly heading towards it, she was greeted with the sight of a huge cave with metal bars, locking the prisoner in with a paper that read "seal" in the center of the cage. "Ah, so my warden finally decides to visit me. How quaint." Amaya shivered at the beautiful and feminine voice that reached her ears. Well, the voice sounded like heaven's own seductress, it carried an undertone of malice. Amaya turned her eyes to the floor of the cage to see a woman that looked absolutely like a goddess. Wavy crimson red hair that fell like a waterfall down her back, a few crimson bangs framed her heart-shaped face, and rose-colored slitted eyes. A beautiful rose-colored kimono clung tightly to her body and showed off her very curvy body and D-cup breasts. Smooth, creamy legs that seemed to travel for miles and 9 crimson fox tails and ears finished her goddess-like figure. Amaya felt fear enter her voice as she whispered, "Kyuubi no kitsune." Kyuubi grinned at that before asking, "And what, my dear container, could you want at a time like this? I have been sealed inside you for 10 years, yet you visit me now." Amaya gathered some courage before saying, "I have come to ask for your chakra so that I can begin training in its use." The fox goddess sneered at her before saying, "And why, little girl, should I give you my chakra?" Amaya steeled herself before saying in a serious tone, "Because, Kyuubi, my life is tied to you and vice versa. So if I die, so do you. I am able to handle your chakra, then we will have a better chance to survive." Kyuubi's face was blank before a large and very fox-like grin appeared on her face. Amaya felt like something bad was going to happen, and she was proven right when Kyuubi sent a rush of her chakra towards her. As she felt the bloodlust and rage consume her, she was able to make out the last thing Kyuubi said. "Let's see if you are even able to handle a fraction of my chakra, little girl." Her laugh was the last thing her heard as she was thrusted out of her mindscape. But the rest of Namika's family. Naruto kept her face blank as he watched his sister's still form. However, inside he was a rage of emotion. He just knew that this was a bad idea. He also knew that his parents would not listen to him and just pressure Amaya to do this anyway. So he decided to watch and wait. He was disappointed as 10 minutes after Amaya had entered her trance, she let loose a scream as crimson chakra erupted from her body. Once the chakra dissipated, everyone saw the change in Amaya. Her amethyst eyes had become crimson with a slighted pupil. Her hair now looked wilder, and her canines and nails had enlarged and sharpened. She growled before charging towards Minato and Kushina in a blind bloodlust rage. The Yondaime Hokage dodged his daughter, his wife copied him. Seeing her prey move, she headed for Naruto, who she had seen out of the corner of her eye. Naruto watched Amaya with sadness as she charged him with high chunin speed. Naruto ignored his parents' warning to get out of her way and just waited. As his sister took a wild slash for his head, he leaned his head to the side and let it pass over his shoulder, dodging all but one claw that cut a line over his cheek. Naruto looked into her eyes and saw nothing but rage and bloodlust, the opposite of her sister's kind and happy eyes. With a quick whispered "sorry, Imauto-chan," Naruto smashed his fist into her stomach. While it did not knock her out, it did get rid of the rage that Kyuubi inflicted on her. Naruto supported her as she sank to her knees and cried. Naruto's eyes softened as he pulled her into a hug. She quickly clung to him and cried into his shirt as she sought comfort. After several minutes he heard his parents approach. He quickly turned slightly and he withdrew his blade and pointed it at his father's neck while never letting go of his sister. His face showed shock as well as Kushina's. His next words further shocked them and sent a slight shiver down their spine. "Mark my words, Otu-sama, Aka-sama. If you ever tell Imauto-chan back to that demon against her will, I will kill you. I may be able to do it that day, but I will kill you both as soon as I am able to." He sheathed his sword and picked his still crying sister up bridal style before running back home, but not before giving his parents a cold and blank glare. As he disappeared into the woods to the compound, Minato and Kushina looked at each other too stunned to do much else. Flashback end. After that day there was an ever-present tension when he was around his parents. On the bright side, he was now even closer with his sister. He let out a sigh as he headed back to the Namika's compound. He knew one thing though. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. When Naruto awoke the morning of the graduation ceremony, he knew that it was going to be an interesting day. After getting out of bed and taking a hot shower to fully wake up, he put on his cloths and strapped his sword to his waist. Once done, he headed downstairs to make breakfast for himself and his sister, as his father had to go to work early as the Hokage and his mother was on a mission before they headed to the academy. After an hour he finished setting breakfast on the table just as his sister walked down the stairs. "Good morning, Amato-chan. Did you sleep well?" Naruto asked as Amaya sat down to eat the delicious, in her opinion anyway, food that her brother had made. "Good morning, Ani-san, and yes, I did, thank you." Naruto nodded satisfied before he too joined his sister in eating breakfast. Once they were both done, Naruto created 2 shadow clones to clean up and lock the compound while they headed to the academy. "Hey Ani-san?" Amaya asked on their way. "Yes, Amato-chan?" Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. Amaya placed her finger on her chin before asking, "Well, I was just wondering how you are able to use so many jutsu even though you don't have as much chakra as me." Naruto chuckled slightly before saying, "I guess I could tell you, and for the record, Amato-chan, no one will have as much chakra as you." Naruto paused as they turned a corner to get to the academy before continuing. "As you know, I have bonded with my sword. What you don't know is one of the many abilities that the bonding did. Thanks to the bonding I now have denser chakra. This lets me use less chakra but still get the same result as someone who used more chakra. Do you understand?" Amaya nodded with an amazed expression on her face. Naruto chuckled one last time before his relaxed look, which only appeared around his sister and his few friends, disappeared and replaced itself with his emotionless mask as they appeared at the academy. Amaya frowned slightly at this before sighing and entering the academy with Naruto right behind her. Once inside, they were greeted with the noise of excited students. They could see that everyone was happily talking about the genin exams. Quickly looking around, they spotted their friends before heading over. Near the back was the rest of their little group. At the back aisle sat Naruto's best friend Shino Abiram. The rest were his sister's friends, though they still hung out with him and Shino. Sitting next to Shino was Hinata Hyuga, and next to her was Sakura Haruno. In the aisle in front of them was Ino Yamanaka, Hanabi Hyuga, and Kira Ichiha. They all waved at them, with the exception of Shino, as they approached them. Naruto and Shino exchanged nods before he sat next to his sister, who had sat in front of Ino and had begun talking with her. As his sister was conversing with Ino, Naruto took the time to look at the other girls. He saw that they had kept their regular cloths on with few exceptions. Everyone has on their pre-Shippuden clothes except for the ones I say differently. First was Hanabi. He saw that she had decided to wear the same thing as her sister, with the exception of Hinata's big jacket, and had instead taken to wearing a tighter jacket that was light lavender in color. Next was Kira, who he saw had decided to wear the old-style Kunoichi battle dress. Can someone please write a description for this for me, please? Look on my profile for the picture. The only one left who had changed her clothing style was his sister. He couldn't stop the mental sigh that came to him. He knew the Kunoichi used seduction sometimes in fights, but his sister was cutting it a little close, at least he thought so. Amaya had kept the orange jacket as before but had cut it so that it showed her stomach. She also had on fingerless gloves and tight black shorts that stopped at mid-thigh with bandages wrapped around her right thigh and kept her kunai holster in place. To finish off her clothes, she had the same shinobi sandals the rest of them except hers were red, along with black stockings that stopped a few inches above her knees. She had also let her hair grow so that it reached her knees but had put it in a ponytail so it reached her mid-thigh instead. She had also let some hair grow so that a few locks reached to her breasts and framed her face. He for one did not like the way she dressed as it only served to draw more fanboys to her, although he had to admit that it did help in her fights. He remembered the first time she dressed like this and they had to jutsu spares. She had utterly humiliated her opponent as he spent more time ogling her than fighting. He snapped out of his thoughts as he sensed a chakra signature headed towards their classroom. He was proven right as a few seconds later the door opened and Iruka and Mizuki, their teacher and his assistant, entered the classroom. Iruka headed to his desk while Mizuki stood behind him with his hands behind his back. "Alright class, settle down." Iruka spoke up after he had laid down his things. Instead of the volume decreasing at his statement, it increased instead. Naruto sighed in his mind as he kept his face blank. His classmates seemed to never listen to Iruka, with his friends and sister being the only exception, oh and the Uchiha, but he pretty much never spoke. Naruto watched as the tick mark on Iruka's face grew bigger and bigger as time went on before he exploded. "Will you shut up and pay attention?" Silence happened instantly as everyone looked at Iruka. Once he had calmed down, he began the test. "Now I am sure that you all are aware that today is graduation day and Mizuki-sensei and I will be testing you on the 3 academy jutsu: the clone jutsu, transformation jutsu, and substitution jutsu. I will call you up and you will do these 3 jutsu. If you do, you will get one of the headbands behind me. Now first is Shino Abiram." So it went. Iruka called everyone up one at a time to do the jutsus. Everyone passed with the exception of a few civilian children. Amaya Uzumaki Namikaze. Naruto watched as his sister walked up to the front before standing in front of Iruka. As she did, Naruto glared at several boys that he saw were eyeing her. They all quickly ducked their heads and did not meet his eyes. Naruto nodded to himself before looking back at his sister. He watched as she effortlessly perform a seal-less substitution jutsu and seal-less transformation into their mother. Once she turned back she went through 3 hand signs before saying, "Kaiten, fire release. Fire clone jutsu." 3 separate piles of fire erupted beside Amaya before it grew rapidly into 3 perfect clones of his sister. "Good job, Amaya. You pass, please grab a headband and take a seat," Iruka said after marking something on the paper on his clipboard. Amaya smiled before doing just that after dispelling her clones. Once she was seated again Iruka called out, "Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." Naruto got up and head up to the front, as he did so he felt many eyes on him. He knew the reason too. He did not show any of his real skills, but everyone knew he was strong as he had effortlessly beaten Sasuke into the ground in a Taijutsu spar when he said something about his sister. Naruto snapped out of his thoughts when he stopped in front of Iruka. Iruka raised his eyebrow when he just stood there. Naruto returned the eyebrow with one of his own before he followed his sister and did a seal-less substitution and seal-less transformation into the late Nidaime Hokage, Tobirama Senju. A second later he cancelled the transformation and performed hand seals before whispering, "Mighten, darkness release. Dark clone jutsu." Everyone watched in fascination as a dark mist seeped from Naruto's body before creating 3 pillars of mist before shifting into clones of Naruto. The blonde sword user dispelled his clones, which turned back into smoke before dissipating, before looking at Iruka. His surprise at the jutsu showed on his face before he regained his composure. "Well done, Naruto. You pass, please take a headband and take a seat." The darkness user's face remained blank as he nodded to his teacher before grabbing his headband and tying it around his right shoulder. Once secured, he went back to his seat and waited for the rest of the class to be tested. When the last student had been tested Iruka spoke up. "Congratulations to those who passed and as for those who didn't there is always next year. Now for those who passed please come back tomorrow at noon so that I can assign your teams. That is all, please have a good day. And remember tomorrow your life as a shinobi truly begins." The class cheered before leaving. When the 2 Namikaze twins had exited they both proceeded to head to their compound. Once inside they headed to the back of the compound and stood across from each other. "So what is it for today Amato-chan, Taijutsu or Kinjutsu?" Naruto spoke up after several minutes. Amaya grinned before saying, "Kinjutsu." Naruto nodded before unsheathing his sword from his left waist. The steel glittered in the sunlight as Naruto waited for Amaya to unseal her sword. She did so seconds later. After biting her thumb and smearing blood on the seal on her right palm. In a poof of smoke the blade was released. Naruto took this time to study the blade as he had never really looked at it when he trained with Amaya. He knew that his parents had had it custom made for her when she told them that she wanted to learn Kinjutsu. The blade was a bright silver that Naruto knew was chakra conductive metal. It was 3.5 feet long with a foot-long handle with a gold pommel. The handle was also wrapped in a crimson cloth. They stared at each other for several seconds before an unsaid signal they both rushed each other. Both swung their swords with deadly accuracy before their blade collided in a beautiful and deadly dance of steel. Naruto pushed his sister away before thrusting his sword at her stomach. Amaya parried the strike before slashing at Naruto's unprotected right side. Naruto quickly spun on his heel before bringing his sword up to block. They kept this up for several minutes. One would attack then the other would parry or block the strike before counterattacking. After pushing away from each other once again Amaya grinned at Naruto before saying, "Hey Ani-san, why don't we kick it up a notch?" Naruto only nodded before sending his darkness chakra into his blade. Once he did the blade erupted in a dark light and was followed by a dark mist whenever it moved. Amaya did the same but sent her wind chakra instead. The blade seemed to take on a light blue glow once she did. They nodded to each other before rushing each other again. Their blades met in the middle as the 2 elements tried to overpower each other, evident by the wind and darkness blades that shot off from the power struggle. Naruto finally gained leverage and was able to push his sister back and slashed at her head. She jumped back to dodge and gained some distance before grinning at her brother. "Looks like you missed Ani-san." Naruto only smiled before a thin 2-inch long cut appeared in between her whisker marks on her left cheek. Amaya's eyes widened as she touched her cheek and felt blood before she smiled at her brother and then charged him again as her cut sealed up with a hiss of smoke as Kyuubi's chakra healed it. They once exchanged plows with their blade before Amaya found a small opening and took it. Quickly redirecting Naruto's blade, she thrusted her blade at his chest. Naruto quickly jumped to the side but let out a small and nearly silent hiss as her blade created a slash along his forearm. Naruto looked at his wound as his sister waited for him to heal it. He did as seconds later a hiss came from the wound as Naruto sent chakra to the wound and it healed in seconds, as well the wound was long it was not very deep. Naruto nodded to his sister before cutting off the flow of chakra to his blade before sheathing it. His sister followed him as she to cut her chakra flow before resealing her blade. You are getting better, Amato-chan. Though you need to make sure that you do not give your opponent a chance to push you back and to keep you feet firm. Amaya smiled as she replied, thanks Ani-san. I will continue to practice, and maybe I will be able to beat you one day. Naruto nodded at her before his face became blank as his Bisquissa skill alerted him to an approaching presence. He looked his right with his following his line of sight with a look of confusion. Confusion turned to surprise as an Anbu with a cat mask appeared before them. Greetings, Cat-san. Can I help you? Naruto asked in his emotionless voice. Pat shivered slightly at the emotion, or real lack of emotion, that came out of the 13-year-old's voice. I wonder what made him like this. Cat thought before regaining her composure. Naruto Namikaze. The council has called you to attend a meeting. Cat said. Naruto nodded to her as annoyance flashed in his eyes as he had an idea as to what they wanted him for and he was not looking forward to this as he had thought that his parents had explained it to the council. He turned to his sister, who looked confused at her brother's summons from the council, before saying, go on inside Amato-chan. I will be back later and will make supper soon. Amaya nodded as she sent him a smile before heading to the compound. Naruto nodded to Cat before disappearing in a swirl of darkness. Cat's eyes widened as she looked at the spot the new genin vanished from before she chuckled. Yes, you are an interesting one, Naruto Namikaze. With her assignment done, she too vanished in a swirl of leaves. Council chambers. Within the council chambers a low whisper was heard as multiple people talked to one another as they waited for the meeting to begin. The council of the village hidden in the leaves was made up of 3 groups. The first group was the Hokage and the 3 village elders. The Hokage was Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime. The elders were Hamura Midokado and Kaharu Utatane, Hiruzen Sarutobi's teammates, and finally Danzo Shimura, who was once Hiruzen's rival for the Hokage seat. To the left was the Shinobi Council. This council was made up of the main shinobi clans and the heads of other shinobi departments, such as Anbu, the combat medical clinic and several others. The last part of the council and to the right of the Hokage and elders was the civilian council. This made up of the wealthy civilians or ones who owned key places in the village that brought in large amounts of money for the village, such as casinos and hotels. This is what Naruto saw when he appeared in the center of the council chambers. As all eyes snapped to Naruto as he appeared in a swirl of darkness. For some it was the first time seeing Naruto's bloodline, while others were still interested in looking at it every chance they could. Naruto though ignored all this as he only stared at his father with his blank eyes. He did not know why his father had not explained what his bloodline truly was, as he knew that he could not pass it down to his children, as it was a gift from Nyx. He would watch and listen though so as to find what his father wanted or his mother, as he knew that she was friends with the wives of several shinobi clan heads. Naruto pulled himself from his thoughts to look back at the Hokage. Naruto Namikaze, do you know why you have been called before the council? Minato asked as he looked down at his son. No, Hokage-sama. Naruto answered in his emotionless voice that could give Danzo a run for his money. The Hokage nodded before speaking, you have been called here to discuss your bloodline with the council and to see whether it is strong enough to put in the Krar Clan Restoration Act. So I was right. If Otu-sama had just explained to the council that my bloodline cannot be passed down to any children I have, this mess could be avoided, Naruto thought as he looked around the chamber as many whispered to each other, or he could have already, and they just don't care and want me under their thumb. He added as an afterthought as he looked at the civilian side of the council, who were looking at him with greed shining clear in their eyes. Humans are too greedy. Ulquiorra said as he looked through Naruto's eyes at the council. Naruto only gave a mental nod as his Otu-sama continued. The council wishes for you to give them a demonstration so that they may gauge whether or not it is needed for the village. Naruto saw that many looked interested at this. He however was not, as he knew that deception was a good thing and he also did not want to show off his skills. Hokage-sama, may I ask a question? Naruto asked as he once more looked around the room with his dark sapphire eyes. He saw him nod out of the corner of his eye so continued. Have you told the council what Akasama had told us when we learned I had this ability? Again he nodded. Then I see no reason for me to be here as the council knows that my bloodline is a gift from Nyx-sama, the goddess of darkness, which she gives to a random person once every 100 years. This means that my bloodline is not a true one and therefore cannot be submitted to the Kra as stated by the Shadaime Hokage when he made the Kra available to clans or any family that is important to the village. The chamber was silent as everyone looked at the young Namikaze in silent amazement. Not only did he know some of the laws of Konoha, which was rare as children didn't like to study the laws in detail, but he also kept himself from being forced into the Kra, as many knew that that is what many on the civilian council wanted. The silence was broken when Danzo spoke up, be that as it may, we still wish for you to show us what your bloodline can do. Naruto looked the old man who was wrapped in bandages. He immediately didn't like him. He had this feeling that Naruto did not like and he knew that he would butt heads with him a lot. Danzo Shimura, are you Hokage? Danzo's eyes narrowed at that as he stared at the child who dared look him in the eye and show about as much emotion as his root ninja. I will take that as a no. I am a genin of Konoha so long as I have this headband, therefore I only take orders from the Hokage or someone of higher rank on a mission. Minato smiled behind his folded hands as he watched his son cut off any chance to put him under their thumb and cut down Danzo. That by itself made his day. He had tried, and still continued to try, to remove Danzo from the council and arrest him for not disbanding Root like he ordered. He however was very good at hiding his tracks and he was unable to find any dirt on Danzo. Well, I believe that is all. Thank you Naruto-kun, you are dismissed. Naruto nodded to his cage before vanishing in a swirl of darkness back to the Namikaze compound. When Naruto entered the compound he looked for his sister and was able to find a few seconds later in the kitchen, eating a pack of instant ramen. Naruto only shook his head before he headed further into the kitchen to cook a real meal for his sister and himself. As Naruto began cooking dinner, Amaya finished her ramen and threw it away before turning to her brother. So Ani-san, what did the council want? She asked with curiosity clear in her voice. Nothing Amato-chan. Just a few people being power hungry. Amaya nodded as she was not worried. She knew that her brother had studied the laws of Konoha so that if the council ever tried to pull something to her, he could do everything in his power to stop it, as that is what he told her when she asked him why he was studying them. They sat in a comfortable silence before Naruto finished dinner. Once finished, Naruto created 2 clones to clean up before kissing his sister on her forehead and then headed to bed. He fell asleep almost as soon as his head hit the pillow, as dreams of mastering his release form floated through his head. What if neglected Naruto is ulquiorra and bleach, and thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.